Hello, this is Kelly Hamon, and welcome to the Resiliency Coach podcast. This podcast showcases people who have faced difficult times and how they got through it. These experiences are real and sometimes raw. The people who share their stories are here to tell you you're not alone in your struggle. They share the tools and resources they use in healing. If you're looking for solutions for getting through tough times, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. So today I'm interviewing my friend, Holly Stokes. Holly is an author who uses NLP and hypnosis in her business, and her story centers around her autoimmune diagnosis, where doctors said there was no cure for her. So Holly, thank you so much for being my guest on my podcast today.
Thank you, Kelly. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. Would you mind sharing your story with us now?
Yeah, so it's been kind of a long window of time. However, interviews like these, we can shorten it up quite a bit. It started in 2005. I was working as a whitewater raft guide in Oregon. So every day we're bringing people out to the water for fun and good times, take them into the rubber boat and guiding down the rapids. And I loved it. I loved living the outdoor life. I would wake up, we'd often do overnight trips. I'd wake up out of the sleeping bag to the blue sky. This was like my passion, was being outdoors. And in fact, before I went to become a whitewater raft guide, I was also a backpacker, professional wilderness guide with at-risk teens. So we'd take the teens out to the woods, and I would sometimes joke, hike them around until they promised to behave. But the whole time we're actually working on life skills, building confidence, communication. When we feel upset, how do we communicate? How do we create a safe space with the people around us? So I really, that was also the outdoor life as well. So this was not just my job, this was my passion, like my way of being. And so one day we're getting ready to pack up and take the boats down. And one of my coworkers notices a really big bruise on my leg and says, "What is that from?" And I said, "Oh, I think, I don't remember, something happened and it kind of and left a mark that was really quite gnarly for the impact." And he said, "You should probably get it checked out." Well, a couple of weeks go by, he's like, "Holly, you should get that checked out." So I did. I went and saw the doctor, got my blood work done. They didn't know what was wrong with me at first. It took a few more times and several different tests. But I was given the diagnosis that I had an autoimmune condition. And I was talking to the doctor. I remember the room where she says, "Well, the results aren't good. It's an autoimmune condition. There is no cure. We can try the natural course route." It does mean it explained a lot of the symptoms I was having. The rashes, I was working out, I was being active. Some people say, "Oh, you have autoimmune or something because you're just not healthy." No, I was like, healthy diet, adventure girl, so you can't make those judgments. But I remember the diagnosis. She said, "This rash that you have and the bruises is an allergy to sunlight." And I was devastated. This meant not just my job, it meant my whole lifestyle. And it was everything kind of turned upside down. And at first I was like, no worries, natural cures. I had certified as an herbalist in my 20s, like about 10 years prior. So I knew some of the things that would help and what to do. However, going through the natural health route in a week, I could hardly walk. There were just some of the herbs that were kind of prescribed for that were not working well for my body. So I went, to the Western medicine route and took prednisone, which is a very strong anti-inflammatory, and it landed me in the hospital with apparently 20% of the population have hearing things, like just crazy kind of symptoms with that. So I was in the hospital, well, kind of putting myself back together from that. I had just certified as a life coach, hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner. So I knew the power of the mind to help us overcome what's going on internally. So yeah, so there's kind of a few pieces along the way. And one that I would say is definitely like work with your doctors and listen to your doctors, but do your own research. That is kind of key number one, because they have a certain set of tools that they work with that, but they don't know other strategies that we are finding really great results with. So they're really good at Western medicine, prescribing medication, but literally one doctor, I remember their response is, we don't know what causes this autoimmune. We don't have a cure, but here, take this pill that will suppress your immune system and likely cause you cancer in 10 years. And at the time, that was as good as they could do. So it made a huge difference, especially with my background in herbalist training, having worked with, seeing amazing results with like some home remedy strategies. I knew these things could work. So I did dig in and do the research, and I kind of did a combination of Western medical and natural health practices, working with a naturopath as well. And along the way, it was a slow road for me. Of course, I had to change my job. I could no longer be outside in the sun all day. That was really challenging to get over that piece of it. But in doing my own research and paying attention to my own body, I was able to recognize things that made it better versus things that made it worse. And when I would talk to the doctors, I'd go into my appointments. I had appointments with a rheumatologist. I think I was seeing them like every 3 months or something. And when I would go in, I would say, hey, I found that if I eat a lot of dairy, the next day my fingers and joints are stiffer and harder to work with. And they're like, oh, that shouldn't make a difference. They just totally dismissed me and brushed me off because that's not their skill set. That's not their training. And I could rant about this, but keeping it in line, and I want to reiterate, I did use Western medicine, and a couple of different cases, it saved my life. But don't let it be your only resource, right? So do your own research. And along the way, I did find certain things that helped. And at a very practical level with autoimmune, well, let me mention this because this is quite alarming. So according to the Center for Disease Control, 1 in 2 Americans has a chronic illness condition, 1 in 2. And, from the herbalist training, I know a lot of these factors could be offset with healthy lifestyle, specifically changing our foods for healthier options. However, that's not the full extent, right? The other thing is 1 in 5 is estimated to have an autoimmune disorder of Americans. That's 20% of our population. So when we look at those really high statistics, what are we doing as Americans that are creating this kind of, boiling pot, creating such high chronic illness and autoimmune? And so definitely like diet and exercise play a factor. I found with this condition, this autoimmune response, I couldn't really exercise beyond 15 minutes because just the motion overtaxes the system, and then I'd end up with an inflammation response. And it would wipe me out. If I did more than a 15-minute walk or exercise, I would be like, out of it for a couple of hours while my body was recovering. So a couple of things here. 1, do your own research. There are many tools that may not be endorsed by the Western medical simply because they don't have that training. They're really good at what they do. Medicine, they're really good at emergency care. However, there's a lot more answers out there. And in doing your own research, pay attention to your body. I think that's kind of one of the key things. If you can find ways to tune into your own intuition, or here's a really simple way to get started with that, is to keep a notebook with your food. What are you eating? And then what is your response? Now, food sensitivities and allergies can show up within 72 hours to 2 weeks. So there are some strategies around that. Yeah, I know. It's really crazy, but doing an anti-inflammatory diet really helped me, which is basically cutting out sugar, cutting out dairy, cutting out wheat. And so many people have sensitivities to foods without knowing it, that these things made a huge impact for me. I would even estimate it would change my symptoms about 50%. If I could keep my food habits, and especially wheat, made a huge difference. So the challenge with these food sensitivities, especially gluten, is that they may not show up for up to 2 weeks. And so many things have little bits of it in the product. So it's in salad dressings, it's in soy sauce. If you go to restaurants, any kind of gravy or thickener, they're usually adding it in. It's in blue cheese. They keep the little cheese things from sticking together with wheat. I found one turkey one year at Thanksgiving, they'd injected gluten into it to, I don't know, create a gravy or something. So that was very challenging. Of course, when I started that, there weren't very good options or substitutes for gluten-free, but now there's a lot more awareness around it, and there's also a lot more stuff. Now I can make cinnamon rolls, I can make brownies. I'm back to my baking ways, but of course, keeping it in balance.
So I heard the resources you used were, and tools. You first were using Western medicine, but it didn't give you all the answers you needed, nor did it help you to the extent you needed it to, as well as it landed you into the hospital due to that medication you were put on.
Yeah.
But then you also use herbs. You also use, it sounds like, NLP and hypnosis. So you're working with the unconscious, and as well as you listen to your body. And I think that's a really important point, is that you were listening to your body and how it felt. And you also use dietary change. And with that dietary change, you were also, again, listening to your body. Were there other tools or resources that you used, or organizations that you used?
Yeah, so it was a multi-step process for me. I'd like to say that I did X, Y, and Z, and suddenly I was better within a year. No, for my journey, it was really 10 years. So keep that in mind, that everyone's journey is different. There's different multiple factors that are kind of wired in together. Starting with some of the practical things first can help you feel better, and then from there it can kind of help you build momentum. So along the way, one of the things to mention is, along with doing your own research and really paying attention to your own body, there's some ways, you can take courses on intuition, different ways of connecting and recognizing what your body wants, what it needs. And then there's these other factors of the mind that are also playing into it that are sometimes not very obvious. And that's kind of where the NLP hypnosis come in. So with, just changing diet, and I was able to adjust some of those factors to be functional. So with Western medicine, it also helped to be functional, that I could start building my practice and, working and doing things at the time. However, along the way, when we start looking at some of those mind-body interactions, that's where it got really complicated for me. But one simple thing is, people don't recognize how much stress can play in to their chronic illness, their diagnosis, or even autoimmune. Stress is a huge factor in any illness or any difficulty. And there's kind of the stress of, okay, what's your job like? Where are the stresses along the day? And that's kind of a simple level stress. But then there are deeper stresses that, you might know some people that handle stress really well. And then some people that they kind of have a come apart if, something's out of place or something's happened. The difference is what their mind is running automatically in the background. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've done a lot of studying on stress and stress management. And one of the things that I came to realize while studying is that stress is not an emotion. A lot of people think it is an emotion. However, stress is caused by either an emotion or by something that's exterior, like a scent or something that's happening. And often that has come from some type of trauma, known or unknown to us, that's happened to us, and we connect the two, and it's the unconscious that has all those connections. Fortunately and unfortunately, it can confuse things for other things. And that makes sense what you just said.
And it is a nervous system response. So part of it is what we think about can trigger or activate that nervous system response. But also, and we know that when we're in high stress, we have higher pain, higher inflammation. Our body isn't able to adapt as well. Autoimmune challenges are worse. So stress can be a really big factor of this. And just like you said, sometimes we're not even aware of what's causing us stress. Well, this was certainly true in my own story because I had trained with NLP, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and hypnosis. I had access to, friends and people that I could work with to kind of decode, okay, why is my system freaking out this way? Why is my immune system overreacting, which is essentially what any kind of allergy response is doing. And autoimmune is very similar to an allergy response. So in working with friends and I had already gone through the training, so I worked with myself quite a bit as well. And in doing that, I uncovered hidden trauma. Well, I previously worked on hidden trauma before I came to the tools of NLP and hypnosis. But at least I learned a skill set that I could walk my mind through some of these own changes. And I also hired professionals along the way that really made a difference in helping me to untangle, that past trauma and abuse story as well.
That's awesome that you were able to use tools you'd already gained and to be able to put them back into practice for yourself and work with others that were using those same modalities. I know how much those modalities in my own life have helped me too, as well as different clients. And it is amazing when we uncover that trauma, how much more life can be smoother, and how we realize that often, you were saying, disease often comes in the package of stress, and how it affects the mind and body. Too often in the Western world of medicine, we compartmentalize things. We say, this is the body, this is the mind, this is the spirit, and they're all separate, but we know that they are not separate and they need to be treated as a holistic body.
Definitely.
And I like how you were doing that. You were connecting them all together.
Yeah. And like I said, it was a process. I definitely I still do. I keep a journal with notes and helping my mind recognize. So kind of a couple things. One, it's been recognized that there's high correlation between people who've had past childhood trauma and chronic illness or autoimmune disorder specifically. So if you are experiencing a chronic illness, autoimmune, you could definitely go, some of the practical stuff, pay attention to that intuition, food sensitivities, clean up that as much as you can, change stress patterns. But also there are ways of resolving those past traumas that are more effective, more quickly, that we can overcome I like to call it that it's NLP specifically has about 5 processes that went through double-blind studies to be approved for working with vets in PTSD. So I really believe we can heal if we recognize what these moving parts are, just like you said, that holistic model that it's, and stress really kind of outlines this really well. Think about the things that are causing us stress now, like coworkers, family, bills. None of these things are going to like hunt us down and, attack us really, but it's that we're thinking about it. So this is like an obvious way that our body is actually physically responding to what we think about. When we get stressed, our body releases stress hormones. There's this whole stress chemical stew, right? And so the more that we can help the mind to allay that inner stress, which means resolving the old story, resolving the past trauma, the difficulty, so that our unconscious mind gets the message that we can be okay in the world as ourselves. And that sometimes it's kind of like the unconscious doesn't get the memo. It's operating off of old scripting, old story, and it doesn't get that these things are no longer happening. And that's why it's running some of this fear and trauma response in the background, even though like at the conscious level, I was all like positive thinking, you can have, do, be, create, whatever, right? But then my body is going through this autoimmune chaos. And so it was very challenging to keep my faith along the way. That's kind of another principle I would say is keep your faith that you can write a new story. I remember one of my coaches even said, well, what does it look like when autoimmune condition is gone? And I was like, yeah, all the things they told me I couldn't do, sunning myself in Mexico, on the beach, going like hiking, being outdoor activities back on the rivers. And I'm happy to say I've done like all of those things on my list because I didn't take just what the doctor said. I was willing to recognize there are more tools available. And along the way, it can be very disturbing, I guess, because some people get great results and others not so much. And so when we see people getting great results, we have to remember we're on our own journey. Our mind, body, spirit system has its own tangle of yarn. I like to call it a tangle of yarns that we can kind of pull these apart and then start addressing these one by one.
Great analogy of the yarn and tangled. And yeah. Everybody does have their own journey. And yeah. Each one of us is very unique with whatever the issue is. And it should be treated uniquely also. I like that yeah. If you're treating it the same way, every single person gets the same pill or everybody gets the same prescription or whatever it is, you're going to miss out on something because not everybody will react the same.
Right. Yeah.
So if you had a piece of advice for somebody that may be going through something similar that you have, what piece of advice would you give them?
Well, autoimmune, I've talked about autoimmune conditions. They all actually kind of operate the same way. They just affect different areas of the body. It's an overreactive immune response. With any health issue, I would say keep notes on yourself, hone your intuition, learn to start talking with your body. One of the things I remember doing, in the kind of that keep the faith principle, I remember the doctors telling me, you'll never, you have to give up your job. You can't be out in the sun. You can't be hiking and doing you're not going to have the energy. That's why you're feeling fatigued. I remember when I was recovering from the hospital, I had ended up with pleurisy from one of my trips to the hospital, and I could hardly move. But what I could do was I could use my mind. I was sitting upright in a recliner in my living room, and I just kept imagining healing light coming down through my body. And, that also touches on kind of my own spiritual practice as well. Healing light has universal meaning and archetypes, as well as like, God and, possibilities. So I imagine it washing through my body. And then I imagined myself sunning myself on the beach in Mexico, doing these things that the doctor said I wouldn't be able to do. I wouldn't have the energy I wouldn't have my health to do. So I remember going through that multiple times along the way, keeping the faith, imagining yourself as healthy and whole, but still having respect for your own journey, right? That, okay, my body is responding this way, and it's trying to communicate something through this illness. So what is it trying to tell me? And when I was doing some of that self-reflection, I got, it's showing you on the outside how bad it feels on the inside, that this old history, this traumatic abuse had been covered up and hadn't been resolved. And so bit by bit, working through those layers, and especially, at the unconscious level, and working with, so many people. I did work with some energy healers along the way. And they gave me hope. Yeah, you can let things go, get back to feeling centered and clear with yourself. You can write a new story. Along the way, now I'm back to medication free, no meds, no symptoms. I was just out at the lake all day yesterday using sunscreen, which, I highly recommend anyway, but having a great time. And I still do need to pay attention to my body. Sometimes some days maybe I don't want to work out as hard, and then of course, healthy lifestyle practices as well. So I guess in that little rant that I did there is keep the faith and really tune in to keep bringing yourself back to your hope, your vision. It's almost that our vision needs to be stronger than some of these, than the diagnosis that we've been given. And not to say don't ignore Western medicine. I'm not saying that. I'm saying work with it, but believe there are other things that can make it better. And even if you can alleviate pain by 10%, 15%, is it worth it to change some things in your diet? Totally it's worth it. So many people say things like I could never give up wheat. Well, when it's the difference between eating this cinnamon roll or being able to not walk for a week, what's your pain tolerance? What are you willing to have a little bit of comfort for being able to move your body and enjoy your life?
Yeah. What is the reward? Is the reward the sandwich, or is the reward the no pain and feeling good and awake and alive?
Yeah.
There's those two priorities. Which one's more painful? Which one's more rewarding?
Mm-hmm.
And if the pain outweighs the reward, I think that the reward should change.
Right. And luckily now there's a whole lot of options out there. Gluten-free, special, dietary things. Your system may not be allergic to gluten specifically. I had clients with cornstarch allergy or corn allergy. Corn is in everything too. Sugar can be one of these factors. So it can be a little tricky, like recognizing what it is. Anti-inflammatory diet can be really helpful while you're kind of mapping out your own mind, body, spirit factors as well. But keep the faith, keep that vision that you can be feeling better, that you can be holding that vision for yourself, even when the people around you maybe don't see it that way.
That's very important. And how important was When you said you would visualize this healing light go through you, and you would visualize the activities that you wanted to do, that you have experienced already, how important was that to you to be able to do that?
Well, there are immediate benefits. We know like meditation and meditation practice can alleviate stress or help reduce stress. The more that you practice meditation practices, the more it builds up that muscle within you to come back to a space of calm or clarity. There are tools with meditation and hypnosis are very similar. In fact, there's a lot of gray area between the two. With the hypnosis tools, and what I was doing really would be around self-hypnosis, but it's also a type of meditation. And you can, like, even after this podcast, I would suggest, getting to a safe place. Don't try this in the car, but let yourself take 5-10 minutes and imagine that white light going through your body. You can even add some words to it, like harmony or relaxing, or the systems of my body can work together. That even in the space of 5-10 minutes, you'll notice physical effects. Blood pressure goes down, heart rate goes down, as well as it also has universal healing, I would say archetypes again. So this is back to our culture as people, what we see and recognize. Like we all have the reference of the sunlight. We all have the experience of being outside on a warm summer's day and feeling so relaxed and calm in that wonderful light and energy. And so when we kind of go through doing that within the body, we can tune in. So one, it helps increase our intuition and connecting with our own body, but also getting the mind and body into that relaxation state, which is where the body does healing and repair. So the more we can get the body into the relaxation state, the more the body can correct some of these things and rebalance itself as well. So yeah, that's having kind of some meditation practice can be amazingly helpful.
Yeah, and some of our audience might not know what we know about our minds, our unconscious, that our unconscious doesn't know the difference between reality and visualization. So our unconscious has a filter or a non-filter, depending on what it is. Yeah. And so if you're watching a movie, an action movie like Mission Impossible, and you're really getting into it and you're like, oh, wow, watch out. Your unconscious is allowing you to believe that it's really happening, which it isn't happening, but our unconscious is allowing us to believe that it is happening. And so when we do visualization, our unconscious does not know that there isn't real light coming through us. Our unconscious does not know that we are not sitting on the Mexican Riviera. The unconscious does not know that we are not going down the river. And so the unconscious believes that it's actually doing those things. And so it helps the brain to know that it is possible because it is happening right now.
Right. Yeah. And so there's also kind of like multiple benefits in doing that. One is that you're giving yourself hope to write a new story. And although at the time, I was immobile in a recliner, I could hardly move because the pain from pleurisy was so bad. So I couldn't have Mexico in the moment, but I could have it in my mind. So you can create these stories in your mind and appreciate them for what they are at the internal level, even while you're working toward better health, energy, vitality, doing the things that you want to do. So yeah, you get like the relaxation and the benefits of that, like clearing your mind, stress relief, but you're also getting the benefits of this is a form of self-hypnosis that you're actually telling your unconscious mind what you want it to be moving toward. And again, it can be a journey, but the more that you can bring yourself back to the internal map of where you want to go, the more your unconscious mind, step by step, gets on board with it.
Yeah, it's powerful how our minds can heal us and can assist us in the things we want to do. So often we overlook our mind, and it's our mind that gets us through anything. It gives us that hope and that faith that something is better on the other side of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, certainly I've had my times of going into self-pity and doubt, and it sucks. So it just feels better to go through those inner imagining exercises and to kind of recenter yourself, get yourself back to the awareness of right here, right now, I'm okay. And now I'm rewriting my story.
I like that too, how you've said it a couple of times, rewriting your story, that you have the pen or the keyboard,
Yeah.
and that you are the author of this story.
Right. And, you know, that really kind of came from hearing the diagnosis and what the doctors were telling me to expect. I could see my future clouding over, and like to hold myself up in my living room and live in a dark, you know, lightless without sunshine and hiking and water and all of this was just, that didn't work for me. So again, like I could have it in my mind, even though it wasn't yet physical reality.
I love it. And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I do have a website. I do work with people professionally. So they could go to the THE brain, BRAIN trainer, TRAINERLLC as in Lima cat.com. There you'll find my contact information, and look for the tools of NLP and hypnosis are amazing. I actually recommend that if you do have a chronic illness or autoimmune condition, go through the hypnosis training, go through the NLP training, because you'll be empowered with tools that you can use for yourself. Like certainly working with a professional is super helpful at untangling this mass, but at least you'll be empowered to work with these inner stress patterns. I call them brain habits and mental blocks that are getting in the way as well. And you'll spend a lot less money if you take yourself through the training and then work with professionals, you know, specifically along the way. And that's how I kind of did it through my own process. I didn't have a whole ton of money that I could pay somebody several $1,000s to take me through the process, but I knew some skills I could do for myself. And along the way, I used my professional resources as well, especially when I got into stuck spots along the way.
That's awesome. Thank you, Holly, for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, audience, for listening to Holly. And remember, there is a way through your difficulty. Please seek out resources and people who can and will help you. Now, if you're looking for alternative tools for handling difficult times or moving ahead in life, contact us at www.resiliency.coach. Hope you all have a blessed day and a wonderful life. Goodbye.